Welcome to the Federation X podcast. And with me tonight, the mystery cast. Here are my guests. You never thought you would see them live. Johnny XS and Strife, the BFFs. Welcome, gentlemen. So glad to have you on.
Well, glad to have him on. I'm just another clown that's attending, let's be honest.
Hey, you get witty commentary.
I'm here to ride the coattails as usual.
That's how the relationship works, actually.
Exactly.
There's coattails that need to be ridden.
Well, there's definitely coattails that have been ridden, that's for sure. Hey, before we dive into this, let me just share, we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the Sponsor Wars draft that's coming next week. We're going to, talk about whether or not we think that there are some returning talent that might show up. But mostly what I want to do is I want to give all the players who I know have been begging. I don't know if you saw some of the earliest podcasts, but there was a lot of, hey, if there's any way you could get Strife on. And of course, I went straight to the source. I assumed if he rode your back for that long, he must know how to find it. And so, we've been, putting the lines out for a little while. So what I want to make sure we get time to do is dig in a little bit of history on the BFFs, a little bit of digging into Strife himself. I know that's going to be really interesting to some of the people that will be watching, and we're excited. Forget Ask XS. We're going to get that professional selling lesson. We're going to have an Ask Strife moment or two, I am sure, in the live stream. And I see we've already got some people following along, so that's amazing, guys. Before we really get rolling on this, let me just ask as a question. Are you up to speed on what's going on the boards a little bit? Do you see an angle or anything going on the boards that you find particularly interesting?
I mean, you can't discount Vampire Hospital.
It is getting a lot of love tonight.
Yeah.
And of course it would be.
Vampire
of course. When I saw the first one, I think the first one was posted in a Bloodsport challenge or something related to Ed. And I was already laughing. And then by the time I saw the next one, it was chapter 13 already.
Jay, you would love it. It's right up your alley.
Yeah.
Vampires.
Classic naked men. Classic naked men.
Oh.
Yeah. Absolutely. What about you, Price? Have you been checking the boards out at all? Have you had time to look at them?
I saw a couple of days ago, I think it was. I popped on. I saw a bunch of Bloodsport challenges, so I didn't read that because that's technically wrestling or sort of wrestling, and I care less about that. But there was one post that really drew me in. So I don't want to name names. They might get embarrassed of how good it was, but it was a love story, and my heart melted reading about these two wrestlers dancing together, a slow dance, gazing in each other's eyes. I mean, my goodness, I might have gotten moist a little bit. I had to close the boards immediately. I said, you know what? I'm not ready to come back. This is too good for me. So I took
just
a
a
step
back.
Too much
for you.
I went outside. I washed up, and I moved on.
Colt would appreciate that you washed up afterwards. He'll definitely appreciate that. What about the pay-per-view? Did either of you guys get a chance to look at what went on in the pay-per-view? Did you see a match that really stood out for you? Something you really liked?
No.
No.
I didn't
read
it. I'll be honest, I did not read it.
Strife, nothing for you?
I really like the way that Naked Man wrapped up all 36 of his angles for the month, especially the Ice Hog death. That was a classic little. He had a moment where his satire really came in strong to a strong finish.
Lewis Ice Hog the Third, is that right? Who was last Naked Man?
Yeah.
That was great.
All right, maybe I need to read it.
Yeah, you might. All right. So, hey, listen, we have some main themes that we're going to hit on tonight. I want to do a little let's get to know Strife. Let's learn the background. Let's make sure everybody's familiar with one of the most popular characters to ever grace Federation X, and then we'll get to the point where I ask for Strife's tips and tricks on selling anyone and everything, which seems to be your gift. And we're also going to ask the BFF to give us a couple of top five. So I've prepped them. I've given them those top fives in advance. So hopefully we will get some really entertaining answers. But before we do all that, let's start with just a little bit of Q&A about Strife specifically. You know, easily the character I think you're most known for. Not your only one, but certainly the one that we know best. Do you agree, or do you think you have one that might rival?
I have conflicting feelings with Strife, because you have to understand, from my perspective, I've seen him the entire time.
Yeah.
A lot of people have seen bits and pieces of him. You've probably seen him much more mature.
Yeah.
Strife. That's kind of more finished product. He's gone through so many phases and so many changes. He's just a chronically depressed guy who he was just down, Debbie Downer, absolutely, just negative, down on himself. He just got into wrestling just so people could beat him up, because he felt like he needed to be beaten up. He just felt like he deserved it.
Well, he ended up spending time with the right people to make that.
Yeah. And somehow I got mixed up with comedy wrestlers, and he turned into like this Eeyore and Christopher Robin's Forrest.
Yep.
And slowly he goes through this adventure where he's like trying to figure out a reason to live, so to speak, surrounded by all of these, assholes for a variety of assholes.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, it's really what Strife is now. It's like a mature, developed character. Very little of it has anything to do with what he started out as. He's really somebody that absolutely was built through interaction, which is one of the nice things I do like about the Strife character. But and I feel the same way about like all the characters. Strife was literally the first one I made in C-Slam. The first character I ever made, I was like, Strife. Oh, C-Slam wouldn't let me put an I in Strife. So I was like, all right, I'll just Wyatt. Just throw it in there. And I was like, oh shit, right away, X-Men reference. I was like, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll just run with it.
So that wasn't intentional.
It wasn't. It was, yeah, if they would have let me have the I would have spelled it correctly.
So was it because someone else already had it?
Yeah.
Cool. And clearly that person sucked balls, because none of us know who they are.
No, it was either that or an underscore. So I went with the Y. I think it was a better choice.
Yeah.
So to be clear, you're anti-underscore.
Well, yeah, no, underscores have their place. They have their place. They clearly communicate something at a whole nother level.
Yeah. That's awesome. Hey, before we get fully through that little bit of backstory on Strife, and we certainly haven't gotten but a little bit of Strife's backstory. One of the things that always interests me about Strife is there was a time when Strife wasn't Strife. Somebody else was Strife, right?
Right. So Strife's biggest feud throughout his entire career was probably the feud with Sick Boy.
Yeah.
And Sick Boy was a great character because his whole character was driven to just basically push people off of ledges. And Strife was already a character. It's basically on a ledge just begging for it. And so Sick Boy and I feuded for months upon months and several runs. And finally we got to a point where it's like, this feud isn't going to get any better than this. This is a pay-per-view main event. Let's just end it. Let's just throw both the characters off the roof. And so, yeah, we worked it out to where Sick Boy fell off the roof and he pulled Strife down with him, and they both took like a 4-story fall. I had Strife hit a billboard on the way down. And we just kind of ended it with them like smacking against pavement. And that's the point when I ripped Strife's leg off.
Right.
And I just left it hang. And so I took about a week off, and I was like, I'm not walking away from e-fatting. So I'm going to go back into it. Kira was still alive and she had plenty of heat. And so I just switched to the CWA, and I just ran Kira Ramos, the valet, as Strife. And I ran that for several months. It was okay. I got to role play with all the other Twitter lesbians, so to speak. But Kira was such an interesting character, though, because Rory was just like a punching bag waiting for somebody to punch him. Kira was actually the person doing the punching. So it was it was a completely different vehicle for me. So it was just kind of like I could go up into people's faces and be really kind of obnoxious in a way. But yeah, I did that for a while, and then the feedback slowly started to coast in every time I went back to the UCE boards, and my old AOD stable would mention Strife mentions, and they kind of were very subtle but very clear about their dislike of the Kira character taking over the Strife moniker. And took Kira down to the regionals. She won the first and only click title for Strife.
Oh, really?
T3SOB with Mikey Ripper. It's the only click title I ever won.
That's awesome.
But then when I finally got Strife back into the UCE, Kira was there. I brought Rory in as like kind of Rory being the valet, being the kind of like manager on the side with his like one leg.
Yeah.
But he was in the ring almost immediately. And this actually almost went directly into the Johnny XS angle between Kira, Rory, and Johnny XS. And that's just the beginning of the BFFs.
Well, and I was just about to ask that. So that's how the angle kind of brought it together for that to start. So yeah, what did XS do to Kira? Because that's obviously how this angle begins.
Yeah, Kira, Rory started getting all the attention, and everyone like looked to Rory like, oh, he's the real Strife, and you're the Strife that we don't want. So she just like freaked out and just started hitting everything that she could possibly hit. And Johnny XS was her favorite punching bag for a variety of reasons.
Yes.
And I don't know what came over me. I don't know why I did it, but we did this post where I was just doing just a whole match action backstage attack where Kira and Johnny XS were just basically rolling in the ground, just punching each other. And I just ended it like the last, I was like, and then they had sex. And I had no idea where Jay would go with this. Technically, I was completely no-selling the Johnny XS character. He had every right to get a little butthurt and throw me a message being like, hey, dude, you're off the rails. But where he took that was just hilarious because it was he wasn't upset that he had sex with Kira Ramos. He wasn't upset that he had sex with a woman over the age of 18. He was upset that he liked it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's such a you move, Jay. I'm not even surprised.
So, like to follow up on that, I think it was soon after, as they weren't even like friends yet, from what I remember. But I remember Aaron did a post of Strife. They were in a room or an apartment, and XS is sitting on the couch with Kira, and every time Strife would leave, they would attempt to have sex on the couch, and it was like 3 or 4 posts in a row. We were just following off each other, and it was just ridiculous. Like, what other ways could they try to fuck behind Strife's back? Well, and XS actually felt, that's when I started making him like actually feel bad a little bit, from what I recall.
It was well, and his whole friendship with Strife, because he didn't want to admit to other people he was having sex with Kira because she was too old for him. It would ruin his image. So he was like, I know what I'll do. I'll become friends with Rory, and that'll give me an excuse to hang out with Kira more often.
Oh, you remember so much better than mine.
That's such a great angle to start. So let me circle back around to Strife. If today somebody said I needed Strife in a post, like what does a player need to know today to really get Strife right?
Oh, Strife has become this kind of hopeless sap. He forgives other people, but not himself. As evidenced by his constant being able to forgive Johnny XS of his constant foibles that always tend to blow up in Strife's face. He's a one-legged ass kicker that just ends up being kind of a punching bag. It's just as you get so much time and so much depth with a character, it gets away from that little kiddie pool depth that we tend to write for these wrestling characters. Yeah. Because you want to write them to be just very shallow so that you can then have some flexibility to move around with them. And what happens is over time, you just build so much, and then it's just that little kiddie pool starts getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And the next thing you know, it's just kind of like, it's almost like a bit of an anchor almost, kind of when you're trying to drag them into certain situations.
So it's funny, I had a conversation recently, and in the conversation I said, not intentionally, but like Ed was never meant to be deep, and so he's not. And the byproduct of that is I've never had an anchor with him. Oh, lost a match? Ed doesn't care. Oh, this happened? It doesn't matter. Oh, that's the next opportunity? So be it. Like, he's so simple that there's no, oh, he's been dead twice. So what? Like,
yeah. I think the closest Ed came to actually caring was caring that Excess was friends with Strife because he wanted to kill Excess for it.
Might be true. The genuine, like, where have you been? Nowhere. You smell like Rory punching.
Yeah.
It's 100% true. So you talk about being in the AOD, right?
Yeah.
So how does Strife end up in the AOD?
Tagged with Sheepinator. They brought Sheepinator in, and Tag kind of Strife followed in.
Okay, so was it before then, or was it being part of the AOD? Like, when was the moment you were like, oh yeah, like I'm in, I'm over. Like, I really fit in this completely messed up world of grown men pretending to be fake wrestlers online.
I don't know of a moment. I'm sure if there was a moment, it passed me by real fast because I thought I was doing even-handed with the Monk and Strife. I thought it was the Monk and Strife even-handed, and I was spending as much time with both characters. I was doing similar things with both of them. The difference is in Mav's Fed and the Monk, it was easy for it to just fall to the noise of Mav's Fed. In the UCE, there was a much smaller roster of serious kind of role play writers and match writers that could do the comedy as well. And so there was just kind of endless opportunity to work with people that maybe weren't as confident in their own kind of abilities or had such a variety of different approaches that I could just kind of go so many different directions at once and just kind of ping pong through these various extremes. Mav would always tell me, because he always wanted Strife to come, and he wanted Strife instead of the Monk because he thought that was my prime character. And I was like, do you read Strife? Do you understand what he's doing? Like that he would flounder in what was CWA or whatever, what have you at the time. And it's just, to me, Strife, he really excelled at the UCE and that kind of close-knit community that we had in the UCE. And it really was a close-knit community for a long time. It was a mixture of both kind of your more realistic wrestler type people and then your straight off the wall comedy people. And there was such a variety of flavors and everything. It was a really fun environment to role play in there versus like the sheer competitiveness of Mavs Feds at the time.
Yeah, for sure. You always get a lot of competitiveness in Mavs Feds. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And especially, he will definitely either draw you to bring your A character, or the competitiveness will force you to transform the character you brought to be an A character. Like, it's the only way to live in that Fed. That's for sure. That's interesting. So you didn't feel the moment when it happens. If you look back on it, like, was it in UCE where you really hit Strife's stride and kind of were in with the community? Was it before you joined the AOD? Was it as a member of the AOD? You certainly must have been over before. Like, it feels like you're on the downside of your career when you start to hang out with XS. Like, that can't have been the upside, right?
Yeah, that was the cliff. I think there was a point in the UCE where I did something called the Travis and Veronica Blumkins angle. Because the UCE.
Sorry, would you say that again?
Yeah, sure. So the UCE, Keebler's UCE starts with Jebediah Blumkins, who is the owner of the arena. It's the Blumkins Steeplechase Arena. And I did an angle where Jebediah's grandchildren were a bunch of stuck up white collar piece of garbage private school kids.
Sure.
And they were going to try to take the Federation away from Keebler and make it more serious, more common, more usual, and take away all the carniness out of it.
Gotcha.
As a way to just kind of just drive a wedge like straight through the middle of the Fed and just kind of cause a whole Fed wide kind of angle forming.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I'm running Strife. I'm kind of running Kira separately. And then I have these two other NPCs who are running separately. So yeah, I was running like 12 plus angles concurrently. And
I can't even run one.
no, it it was ridiculous, but it was a lot of fun and it was pretty successful. And that's when I really felt like, okay, this is, I feel like I'm getting to a point or level where, you know, okay, I can drive things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's interesting you can pick the moment. I see Latoya's listening on the live stream and she said, like, I remember that one of my alts was in there at that time. It was great stuff. And of course, I don't feel like anybody else is looking going, I don't remember Strife being over. Like, I don't think that's the argument. I think there's a lot of people going, yeah, I remember that, or I was there for that, or, you know, that was, you know, compared to where we were, there seemed to be this huge angle going on. Yeah. So that's awesome.
You know, I think Strife, I would say you were probably where I remember you really like becoming, you know, you know, somebody that really stood out. Obviously your angles and everything were one thing, but when you and Fats posted like 100 and something times in the
DIT,
Desperado invitation.
That was terrible.
What the heck, guy? I don't know this story, but if there's 100-something post match, I'd like to hear about it.
No.
if you want a redeeming thing, if you want to know about Philly Fats as a character, as a player behind the character, you guys, if you say you think so highly of me, keep in mind, this is me going at my best, taking 2 days off of work and school, just sitting down and posting from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. Just dropping, you know, 500 plus word posts, 3 or 4 an hour, never continuing off of myself, always continuing off of somebody else. But you know that I can sell other characters, so I don't even have to have my character in there. So I'm just constantly going like this all day long. And Philly would not let me win.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Philly kept up in quality and quantity the entire time.
That's awesome.
So that's the level of competitiveness. I seriously, I feuded with him as Strife. And I think well, of course, I was the heel. I had to make Strife a heel for that because Philly was the face. But I feuded with him for like 3 months for the UC title. And the DIT was part of me trying to get that UC title. I won it once, and he let me have it for 1 day.
Yeah, I remember.
So I heard a couple things in there that I want to draw out. So the first is I heard you talk about how you're more than capable of writing posts in which you have no character. So you could write a post with nobody in it, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, there'd have to be somebody in it.
Yeah.
But nobody that you're in control of.
Well, I mean, somebody's in control of them.
Yeah.
I'm just borrowing them. It's the Fed is a toy box. Why do I have to only play with my toys? I mean,
I don't
can't we
think
share?
I think if we took a poll and said, who would you most like to spend today writing your character, Strife would come up a lot.
100%.
Yeah. I think people are always entertained by it. I know, I think about the times that we had that, you know, XS and Strife and Ed in a Fed, and I would come on and be like, oh, there's a Strife post. Ed's in it, and I'm just going to be entertained. And I would just read and laugh. And I was always entertained and always like, I mean, my work here is done. I'm good. Like, nothing required. So I think the other thing I heard is you're advocating that somebody who's a Sponsor Wars captain right now should be pinging Philly Fats going like, today's the day you decide to come back. Because he can drop 100 posts in 48 hours. That's
I don't.
What I heard.
That was quite painful. But it was fun. But yeah, seriously, we're on IM while we're typing our posts, talking about like, hey, where are you going to end yours? Like, so because I can start typing mine now. So we're typing the replies before we even read the final post we're replying to.
So that's funny. I've done that in some of the like you know, competitions or matches or in the King of Wrestling where you're like, hey, listen, we're going to be up against it. Just tell me where you're going to finish the post.
Yeah.
And if you've got a high spot, let me know what it is so I can at least sell it. And, yeah, here's what it is. And I'm like, I've written 90% of it. You're like, post it. I'm like, okay. And then rewrite, edit. Okay, I'm good. And the next post comes up and it's, you know, 1,500 words. And you're like, he got that done in 6 minutes. I'm like, no, that's not what happened. That's awesome. All right. Significant title runs, like big belt runs that you would point to if people asked about Strife's championships.
I only have the OWC.
I mean, when you have an OWC, it's not, it's not only, it's significant. Who did you face in the OWC?
I broke Carnage's run.
Nice. So you're saying you could take Carnage anytime?
If you wanted to.
Yeah, probably.
Love it. I love it.
I have
wait, did I share this? Carnage butt dialed me on Discord. Have I shared that on another podcast? I got this call on Discord and I'm like, why is Carnage calling me? So I answered it and just dead air, and I left him a message. I'm like, did you call me for something? And like hours later, it's like, oh yeah, I fell asleep. I must have dodged it by accident. Just oh, that's good stuff.
I did have BRBs. So I won the first Wrestle BRB with the Monk, and then I won a BRB with Strife, and then I won a BRB with Folker. So yeah, all my 3 primaries I won a BRB with.
Did you see the fantasy draft?
Yeah.
You did? So I'm sure no surprise to everybody had Strife in the top 5. What I actually want to ask about is we all forgot about the Monk. He wasn't even on the available to draft list. But Chris and I both tried to sandbag and steal you by putting Volker in our envelope and screwed each other, and neither of us got you. Did you see that?
You both misspelled his name, so clearly one of you.
You know why? Because we took it from the list. So somebody misspelled it on the list. And that might have been me. I went back through. And the funny thing is, like, I didn't go surf all the old posts. I went back to all our old heat scores. So I pulled up all the whole old heat scores. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, I know who that was. And I put him on the list and thought, no one will notice. Chris, of course, noticed and was like on his list as well. And he's like, I'm going to take this person. I was like, oh, damn it. Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation because he continues to say to me, I still want him. So let's work this out. I don't think so. That's hilarious. So you talked about doing barroom brawls and also winning them, and then having broken Carnage's run and the One World Championship. I think I know the answer, but I'm interested to ask, do you prefer one of the formats over the other?
I do not prefer BRBs.
I assumed you preferred the interaction, but yeah. I wanted to ask. So why do the BRB 3 times then?
Well, he hates himself like straight.
Yeah, pretty much. No, the Monk, I never really participated in rewrites. I never had the chance in C-Slam. So the first time Wrestle came up, yeah, I wanted to try it with the Monk. He's a simple character. The Monk was just he was just an antisocial guy who likes quiet. So he'd just be like the old man jumping out in the yard saying, "Get off my lawn," kind of a thing. Tall, dark, and brooding. Yeah, the Monk was a simple character. And then Strife won it. It was just, so I could win it with Strife. And then with Folker, he was such a fun character to just tell stories with. I could do rewrites with Folker all day long because he was a weak heel. He was a villain. And he was incredibly pathetic. And he would just, the level of like BS garbage underhandedness that he would engage in to try to thwart a match. By the time most Folker matches, by the time the entrance is happening, the match is almost done. Because he'd already tried to foible trying to get the person to even show up to the ring, like a dozen different foibles. So yeah, Folker was a fun character. He'd always show up with a entourage of like 12 people because he wasn't going to fight the match. He was going to have somebody else do it for him. So yeah, he had to have at least, his 3 valets, his 2 bodyguards, his driver, and all this garbage. But yeah, Folker was a fun character because I could be that foible basically, and I can make things really interesting.
And did you like the dynamic? I mean, as a guy who's capable of selling like everybody's character and every situation, did you like the dynamic of having a character surrounded by all these people so you could draw out like a particular trait or character, like without it having to be the main character all the time?
Oh yeah, and it would always change. And every time Folker came up, I can just change his entourage or the surrounding characters. And all he was doing was just standing around doing the same promos, which was fine for him. But yeah, it's the diversity of it.
Right. Hey, so we're going to break from our regular schedule because I see that Techno has asked a question. I think it's a good one, and I'm going to put you on the spot. And then if you want some time to think about it, you can tell me. But Techno would like me to ask, so we're having an Ask Strife moment. Who would be the top 5 characters that are in Federation X right now that you'd really like to run an angle or feud with that you haven't worked with before? And I don't know who you haven't worked with. Like, are there 5?
Yeah, there probably is, because I don't think I've ever worked an angle with one of Chris's characters before.
Yeah,
So
okay.
yeah, that Tony Robes would be a good one.
But he'd be number 5. Like, he's at the bottom of the list.
Well,
right?
yeah. I remember Kira used to feud with Lasher on occasion, but I don't think I've worked with a character. So probably Maverick Dawson would be on there.
Sure.
That would be a good one. I am sure that Strife has crossed paths with Kansas Kid. I don't think I could have avoided that.
It does seem like something that would have happened, right?
Yeah. That has had to have happened. I think. No, I think I've touched. Well, but Strife and Storm have never gone head to head. I don't think. I think we've avoided doing that.
I'd pay to see that. For sure, I think that'd be entertaining.
And I don't think he's ever crossed Techno either. So.
Well, and I assume that when Techno asked, like, obviously a point of interest for him. So, yeah.
Max Entropy, I've crossed paths with Max Entropy. Carnage, of course.
Sure.
Omega. Is Omega the same player behind Vile and Rasputin? Is that Mike?
I don't think Omega is the same as Rasputin. I think Omega and Rasputin did a lot of angles together, but I don't think it's the same character.
Okay. Well, then I'd throw Omega in there, absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, that's a really, I think that's a list people would be excited about. So that's a great question. And Tim has confirmed, Lars has confirmed that they are not the same. So there's your top 5. Maybe not necessarily in order, but we found 5. The only order we know for sure is Tony Robes' last.
Yeah, at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bottom.
Let's jump back in. Biggest match that you ever had with Strife? Like, is there a marquee match? Was it the OWC win?
I think the OWC win was probably the best role played and the best storyline. I think it was Carnage, Max Entropy, Strife, and Johnny XS, and Jay had some hilarious angles. That was a really good match. That really went to the 9s, and it was really top quality all the way through.
And that's who your run was through the OWC?
Yeah, I took Jay. Jay was with me as my backup through the OWC.
That's a legit OWC run. Like, that's some real head-to-head strong. That's like a King of Wrestling field run. I sound surprised because like some of the later OWC runs were not that. But that one is definitely a tough run. And so who is the finals?
That was the final, actually.
Everybody.
It was so yeah, you brought in somebody else with you to be your backup. Carnage brought Max Entropy, and then I brought Johnny.
Wow. So how does this work so obviously I didn't run in the OWC. How does it work? Like, Johnny comes in post, does that add to your score? Like, what's the dynamic there?
I don't think it was cumulative like that.
No,
I think it was just there
just for the angle.
Yeah, just for the angle. Yeah.
Okay. Because I would be concerned, right? You bring Price and he disappeared.
Oh, forget it.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, hey, what happened? I had to make popcorn. Like, just
3 days later. So did you win? How'd we do?
It's awful. Who's your biggest feud? Is it Sick Boy or
It's probably
have you
Sick
had
Boy.
some others? It is.
I've had feuds with Sick Boy. I've had feuds with Philly Fats. I had Genocide, of course. But yeah, Sick Boy's probably the biggest one.
It's interesting to me. Like everybody seems to have their genocide feud story.
Yeah.
I had to go to a different character, and I know I've shared this before, but Bryce and I played together, and when I said like, oh, I'm gonna be in this Fed, and he's like, oh, Gino's there, you guys are gonna hate each other. But I didn't take Ed, I took a different character.
Right.
And so we got along super well. And then by the time we were deep in FedEx and really, really tight, I was like, I'm going to play Ed. And he's like, oh, good. So we can feud, like, because the characters just weren't lined up to feud. So it's funny to me. Did you, like, to me, Gino strikes me as the type of character that would feud with Rory 1 minute and, like, befriend him to use him.
Yeah, it's exactly what happened. This was like early wrestle, and I think we were in show or something like that. Some commissioner that couldn't really handle the volume of the boards, and he was feuding with Chevalier, and I was throwing in some additional posts to kind of help out, kind of heat it up. And of course, Chevalier would read one of my posts and then just go straight to replying to genocide and completely ignore me, or blame everything that I did on genocide. And so I get to the end of the month, and Gino's like, hey, we're going to reform the NC, the new court stable. And so I got Johnny XS and Static and then Strife, and we're going to all form a stable, and then we're going to go to Mavs Fed. And I was like, well, I have the Monk in Mavs Fed. I don't want to take Strife to Mavs Fed. I want to go to the UCE with Strife. So, you guys can go do that. Thanks for the invite, but, I'm going to go do this other thing. So the day after I get to the UCE, I go back to the show board, and they're, Gino is role-playing, offering Strife the NC membership, and then swerving him and having Johnny XS and Static chair shot him.
Yeah, we did the concerto. I remember
Yeah,
that was the first one we did.
That is such a Gino move. Like, such a Gino move to be like, hey, we should do this thing. Yeah, I'm not interested. Great, let me go right swerving you after I offered to. 100% a Gino move. That's hilarious. Do you look back and think, hey, this particular post was maybe my finest, like it sold something or responded in some way to an angle or really advanced something super well? Like, is there one or two that really stand out?
The reactions to the posts sometimes stand out. When somebody messages me and mentions, a player that I really respect, somebody that I really, I value their opinion, and they write and they say, dude, you got to give me a new keyboard. I just shot drink all out my nose, all over my damn keyboard. It doesn't work now. And that's what I really, that's worth, 100 of those eFed titles that I don't even remember having in the first place, but I remember those.
That's awesome.
Those comments.
Yeah, what a great answer. Do you have, like, just off the top of your head, like 2 or 3 players that did that you look back and go, those are players I really respect, and it was a big bump for me when they said, hey man, you wrecked my keyboard?
Yeah. I won with the Monk, who is a character that it's dry toast. He's dry toast. But I won a comedy match against Stormfire, and it was Stormfire actually messaged me that, and I was just like, that was huge.
That's awesome.
That was, because that was a rough match, but no, that was a really big compliment. He's one of those players I really miss being able to play with, because anytime you had a Stormfire match, his comedy was all perspective based, and the second you threw that narrator's booth with Bernie in it, kind of adding that dynamic, how could you not invest in that? That was just a toy that you just couldn't avoid playing with.
Right. That's awesome. What's your biggest angle? What's the best angle Strife has ever been in?
Well, it's probably the BFF angle. See, Blumpkin Steeplechase angle was a good one. I remember during my T3 SOB run, the whole reason I teamed with Mikey Ripper is because Mikey Ripper came to Kira Ramos like first day 1 in the regional Fed. He said, hey, we're going to tag team together, and if we win the T3 SOB, you have to have sex with me. And so Kira was like, I've never won any click title with Strife. And I was
What are
like,
the
yeah,
odds?
sure. What the fuck ever.
Yeah.
And then I get to the finals, and of course we're going up against like Haley and her partner, and she had the same deal with her partner.
That was with Techno, I think.
Yeah.
I think so.
And I just remember like we were in the finals, and it's like towards the last match of TSU SOB, realizing that one of us was going to win. And so Haley
is about to become a
yeah, somebody's
full-blown Twitter
yeah. So we like literally Kira walks Mikey into a dark room from one direction. Haley walks her partner into the dark room from the other direction. Haley and Kira leave. Sex happens with who's ever left in the room. We just left it at that.
I'm curious. I got to ask, whose idea was that move?
That I might have to take credit for that post myself.
That's pretty clever. Pretty clever. How did you first end up in FedEx?
I assume Jade dragged me in.
I remember asking you to come over. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Was it like specific to a legacy tournament, or was it just a, hey, you should get your ass over here?
It was pretty much a get your ass over here, I'm pretty sure.
Nice. When do you remember when you kind of put the character away and were like, hey, this, like, I'm done? Because it's been a while, right?
Well, I think Burns' first Memorial tournament was the last time I e-fedded.
So that's got to be 4 years or so now, right?
Yeah.
5.
It's been a long while.
Yeah.
But no, I remember my my last e-fed, my last FedEx run. We had just kind of wrapped things up. People were going inactive. The Fed was just kind of dying activity wise.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Rory marrying Alyssa, and then they were going to go run off and adopt all sorts of Johnny XS bastard babies from all over the world.
Melissa was XS's kid, right?
Yeah.
The nun. Well, the former nun or whatever.
Yeah, the former nun. Yeah. Rory turned from God.
And that Rory, what a guy. He sounds like a bad guy.
He's a heel. He's just a heel. Yeah.
Somebody rubbed off on him.
Man. So just out of curiosity then, Aaron, when I mean, you're not playing, you haven't played for a while. What do you do? Like, how do you fill your time? What's your thing?
I am a fine art printmaker.
Fine art printmaker.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
That's a bunch of words squeezed together. No. Woodcut Intaglio. Basically, I make artwork through a process of indirect matrices that I run through a printing press, and I actually will roll the ink onto it and run it through the press to create hand-pulled originals.
Nice.
It's an antiquated, outdated piece of technology that process-wise and thought-wise, it's a very indirect way to get to an end result of an image. And the technical aspect of it, I just find it to be ever challenging. Because usually when you're painting, it's very direct and immediate and emotional. But when you're trying to do the same thing on a metal plate with acid, it comes much more technical.
It almost sounds like you're downplaying it while you're telling us about it, and I just get this feeling like how very Strife of you to describe it that way. Like, I have this great talent, I do this amazing thing, but I don't want you to think it's too cool. So let me just, like, it sounds very cool.
It's almost like I should have one on my wall from 11 years ago.
As if somebody had committed or something that to you or something.
Amazing. You would think friends would do that for you, but
I mean, BFFs. I mean, come on.
That's right. Hey, so before we move off of Strife and start to talk about the BFFs, let me just ask, what character did you hate playing with the most?
Hate playing with?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, Damien Cage.
Damien Cage, okay. I mean, do you want to give us any dirt on that, or you just want to say it?
No, there's not too many people that I absolutely hated playing with. There are people that have their annoying foibles. Probably my biggest foible for somebody to kind of demonstrate is somebody that doesn't read. Because if you're gonna roll and engage in rolling role play, you have to write and you have to read.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how good you write, if you don't read, it's just cracking up crap.
I get you. So what you're basically saying is you want me to stop skimming posts and actually pay more attention. All right. Message received. I appreciate you not calling me out. I'll take the bullet for both of us, Jay.
That's right. I've been skimming since 2005.
That's right. I was skimming before it was
at least-
cool.
It's fine if you're a quality skimmer, but some people they can't handle it.
Yeah.
Well, I skimmed just enough to spell somebody's character's name wrong this week, and it turned into an entire component of our match that I got their name wrong. So, I don't know what to tell you. Is there a character that you just genuinely loved, whether it was in working with or just like watching the character that you were like, I love that character?
Okay, got a minute? Because I got a couple.
Yeah, of course we do.
Sheepinator. So Sheepinator was hilarious. He was a swinger. He had his valet Little Bo Peep, and so we would go in and do the promo. He would go in and engage in the match action, but then always Little Bo Peep would be running around and just having sex with everybody that she could touch or get her hands on. She'd disappear underneath the announcer's table, and some of the announcers would start getting squeaky voices. It was just a hilarious fun because there was always something going on with the Sheepinator posts. Situational humor was amazing. I miss playing with Sheepinator. Sheepinator was great. Stormfire was always great because his character was so happy-go-lucky, and the dynamic between Stormfire and Bernie was just so enticing. It was such a fun thing to play with. Wingnut. Oh, I used to love Wingnut's posts. Wingnut was the guy who was he was a clown, but he wasn't a clown by like profession. He was a clown like some other people might be Jewish. So it wasn't his rainbow colored hair was his cultural identity.
Got it.
But it is like the subtlety of his humor. Like it was blatant and subtle at the same time. And the way that he just wove everything together was just amazing. And God, I'm just calling the comedy people out, and you're getting to realize how much time I spent in the AOD.
Yeah.
I was just noting, I'm like, oh, so like I remember Strife, he's funny, but he's really a kind of serious wrestler who gets the humor. But I think Strife recalls Strife as comedy guy. So that's awesome.
Well, yeah.
Like,
well, when they go through the AOD shootdown, it's like Naked Man says, "I am naked." And Stormfire says, "Dare to be stupid." And Strife says, "Why am I here?"
That's awesome. So let's talk a little BFF because, you guys are, not an insignificant team. There was a lot of celebration by Lars in the fantasy draft that he got both members of the BFFs. Even if he got one of them by swearing to me that he wanted them to put together the talent Nazis and not the BFFs. So I don't know how we end up in this place where he's celebrating having them both. Hey, I see Philly Fats, by the way, is in the live stream. And Philly, I hope you were here when Strife was talking much love for you and sharing that you're capable of doing 100 posts in 2 days. So, what Fed did the BFFs come together and where was the origin taking place?
I'm pretty sure it was UCE.
Was it?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, they knew each other previously, right? I mean,
we've been in the same Fed since C-Slam.
yeah. I had a really terrible alt that was in the same Fed as Strife, and we didn't really interact much. I think towards the end, maybe a little bit, but it was just, I remembered him from there.
It was more messaging than anything.
Yeah, and then So XS was in IRCW with Manowar, Static. So Mano got promoted XS's first month, and then the next month, I think XS and Static got promoted. I think Strife got promoted the same month from
Yeah.
UWA, and then we all went. I don't remember what the major was, but we were all in the same Fed then. So that's where our interaction actually started.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was the UIWA. That was there was Silencer, Penance, Bill for Sin. So it was Eric and Jordan, Goalie Bill, Rasputin.
Yeah, I remember him.
Johnny XS Static, of course. Sick Boy was coming in there. There was a lot of talent, and I remember
that's a lot of talent.
And I remember as Strife just trying to like who do I go after, and I just kept bouncing off of characters, and I just struggled a little bit for. But I was really excited for that next month. I was going to have a breakthrough that next month, and then C-Slam died.
Yep.
Oh, I remember that, of course. So, was there a point? Was there ever a point where either of you were like, anybody but that guy?
No,
I'm sure he said it.
Jay, the beauty of Jay is that he will sell anything ridiculous. He will look past whatever garbage you might have, but he will sell, and he sells well with great humility, and he has no problem making fun of any of his characters whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I think that we've seen that.
Yeah.
And I'll also say I'll agree with you. Like, he'll look past anything, even to the point of being like, well, like, how do I great, you did that. I still think it's dumb. So, oh, you're dead? No, you're not. I'm going to get a voodoo doctor and raise you from the dead so that your character's still around. Like, I'll deal with the situation. Just give me whatever it is, and I'll deal with it. And
I might not finish the situation, but I'll start it. I'll start dealing with it.
Yeah, that's for sure the case. So let's do the same thing we did when we talked about Strife, and let's just throw this to both of you. Like, let's say tomorrow we're having a legacy tournament, and there's all these new players who don't really know the BFF dynamic. What do they need to know to sell the BFFs today?
Well, today or in general, right? Today, all you need to sell Johnny XS is don't post about him. But I mean, look, let's be honest. XS historically has been, one of the most shallow, obviously egotistical, just like any other, typical heel. But
you're getting a little quiet there, Jay.
Oh, hold on. Hold on. Is that a little better?
Try again.
Hold on. Did it unplug?
Now you're good.
Okay, sorry. So XS, egotistical like any other heel, shallow, whatever it takes to get ahead. But when it came to Strife, was the closest thing for him to actually having, quote unquote feelings to another human being.
Right.
Like he would actually feel bad doing things to Strife. It was the closest thing to an actual relationship he ever experienced in his life. So and that wasn't really, that was only half from me. I mean, half of it came from Aaron pulling it out of XS. I'm like, wow, that's fucking great. And then, I think I'm the one that kind of started the XS wanting to be his friend, but he took it to another level where I didn't know I was capable of like posting those type of things with XS.
Yeah.
And every time like Johnny X gets reminded of something that he's like never had before, he responds like an 8-year-old girl to it.
Yes.
So, what about the BFFs? Like, what's their biggest feud?
That's got to be SBFFs.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, the name was clearly, bit of an homage.
Yeah.
Right. There was a dynamic that we were going for, but that's funny that would be the answer.
Yeah.
Did you find before coming to FedEx that the tag feuds really only centered around going to the T3? Like, did you find that you didn't get big tag feud stories? Or is it just that Gino and I were such dicks that it became the biggest story so easily?
I don't really remember any tag matches or tag runs with the BFFs in Wrestle. We were tag team partners and we role played, we interacted. Heat, of course, took place in my OWC, and every time we had a Fed-wide event, we were side by side, just kind of having this weird Mutt and Jeff dynamic going on.
Yep.
But I don't think it actually translated to an actual tag scene until we got the FedEx.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 100%. And like we won a legacy tournament, right?
You did.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
Who did we beat in the finals? Some shitty team.
I don't remember.
Oh, I do. It was the worst character ever in FedEx. It was like Nighthawk or something.
I think that the judging in that match has been brought into question. not the scoring of Strife's post. That's not where the judges might have gone wrong.
Was it the same judge who picked Excess over Austin James?
So hey, you know
That was another great judging.
So let's pause for a second. Do you know that not one, but two, both the judges that gave you that match have since come back and said, I'm embarrassed by my judging? Chris's new out is that he admitted from the beginning that he was doing it to be a dick because he assumed the other judge was just going to give it to me. And the other judge was Karen Crow, who has since said, I'm really embarrassed by that.
Well, he's always high. So embarrassed about everything.
No, I do think it's no small credit to Strife that you guys won that, because your inability to sell Hawk as anything other than a robot really does not deserve any points.
I will always only sell him as that. I don't care if he unmasks and is the deepest character in the world. He's just going to be a vapid robot to me. I am good.
I'm one day he's going to unmask and he's going to be a robot just for you.
If he unmasks and it's Ed, that would be classic.
Oh, would be disturbing. So would that also then qualify as the biggest match for you guys then, as a tag team, would be the legacy win?
Yeah, I would say either the legacy win or actually the match versus Alan and Gino.
Yeah.
That was an amazing match.
It was a very good match. It was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah,
for sure. I think I'd be hard pressed to find three guys that I wanted to throw up that many. Like, I think back then we were doing like 9 posts in a match or something like.
yeah.
And that I wouldn't lose the interest and be like a certain amount in and be like, okay, guys, like, are we done with this?
Well, yeah. You get 3 days in and you're like, wait, oh, it's over? Like, what?
Yeah, that's not normal, right? And I think that match definitely is one of the ones that I would look to and say that, yeah, it was a lot of fun. And the dynamics were all good, right? Like, there's an Excess and Gino dynamic. There's the how does Excess deal with Alan and because of Gino dynamic, and Stripe just sells everybody so well that you're like, and Alan doesn't dislike Strife. It's not like it was Ed in the ring and it was just like, let's kill. Like, Alan's like, this is Strife, like he's a big deal. That match was fun. I totally agree. What's the coolest angle you guys did as the BFFs? Like, was it the formation? Was that the coolest angle? Was it something else down the road? Like, what was the bit that you look back to and go, that was really the highlight?
The formation, it all just kind of rolled into one, because it was first Johnny XS only became friends with Rory just so he could have sex with Kira.
Right.
And then it came to a point when he realized, no, he actually values Rory as a friend, but does he value Rory as a friend as much as he likes having sex with Kira? No. But then it came kind of a maybe, and then it was like, oh shit, I actually value Rory's friendship more. And then he convinced himself that if he helped Rory win the OWC, and then broke the news that he was sleeping with Kira the whole time, but Rory
Go
might,
over.
might still be his
Yes.
friend.
That's such an excess moment. So let me ask this, Price, like at what moment going into that did you realize, wait, he's going to the OWC and I'm his second? How do I use that in my end?
Yes, that was
How long did that
exactly-
take you?
Like, how can I work this into making this XS's OWC run?
Right. That's so funny. And so classically you to very quickly be like, oh, you need a favor from me? Let me also make that favor about me and let me make sure I get over on that favor. Like that's such a great excess dynamic.
That's when we brought back Static, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was one of the first times. I
Wait,
think.
That's
Was
of the that would be Fat Static. Yeah, the of the list of
Just gonna
sins
ask.
that we've committed to.
If
Dude.
Static ever came back, he'd be like, when did I get fat? And like, what the heck is going on that everybody sells me as fat?
Yeah, I emailed him. I found his old email. I don't know if it works, but I took a shot. I
That
sent
would
him an
be so
email.
cool.
Like, dude, you don't know what happened in the last 18 years with you.
Man, people
Well,
love
it's-
your character. They don't even know you.
he was gonna bring Static back, and I was like, okay, well, let's bring Static back. And he was like, I reached out to see if he'd come back, but he's too busy doing his like podcasting about movies or whatever he's doing. And then we just started riffing. It's like, yeah, he's probably getting all overweight. And it was like, well, Static's character was always really lazy, anyways.
That's right.
So I was like, why don't we just bring it back as a kind of a mixture of both like the real life Static and the character Static? And I was like, oh, that would be terrible. But we did it.
So you did it. Right.
Yeah,
that
we
was
did it.
terrible. So we're doing it. That's pretty much how it works with access. Yeah. So like, and I said earlier, the BFFs and the idea of the BFFs and that tension that led to that angle and that match, obviously there was an influence, right? When Gino and I were first kind of trying to decide on a team name, and I'm pretty sure it was Gino that said like, well, they're the BFFs. What if we were the SBFFs? And so I think the question is that I want to ask is, do you know if just the dynamic and the chemistry and everything, like, did any other teams kind of take inspiration from what you guys were doing? Did you see any of that?
Not that I saw.
No,
No?
No,
not really.
there wasn't that. At least from what I ever read, there wasn't that angle of almost like a forced friend. Well, there were forced friendships, but it was always just on the business side, right? And
Right.
and ours ran so much deeper on both sides, right? Rory didn't want to do it. Excess originally was like just using him, and it morphed in so many directions over the years, including when Strife started dating Excess's daughter, and then whatever else happened in between. Just a whole conglomerate of two wrestlers you would never think would ever get together.
Yeah, and then Strife starts dating Alyssa, and then Johnny XS gets offended and feeling betrayed.
Yeah. So he was playing the victim.
Turned all the way around. That's right. Why do you think the BFFs are so well remembered and admired so long after the last time you guys played them together?
Not because of me.
You guys. I think I was listening to the podcast, and one of the first podcasts I listened to, within 5 minutes, somebody said, "Oh yeah, Strife. Yeah, Strife is great. We don't need to talk about Strife, how great he is. We talk about it all the time." It's like, guys, what are you doing?
I'm trying to remember. So we went through a couple podcasts where we were just getting things going up again, and I was saying to people like, "Oh, you're fantasy fed, like you dream 10 people." And people would pull out 10 and I'd go, "So no Strife?" And they'd be like, "Well, I assumed Strife." Like everybody, the default's of course Strife. Yeah. And so somebody came on and I can't remember who it was, but I remember that exact commentary that you're quoting. They were like, "Well, we don't need we talk about Strife." Well, no, we can skip Strife, of course. Like, and it's because, you don't end up in people's, top fives by accident. But I think I think also when I say to people like, tell me your greatest tag teams, like I'm amazed how many people, still rank the BFFs really highly. And some of them, I'm not convinced ever saw you guys together.
Where was our dominating tag team run outside of FedEx for a couple of months?
It's interesting, right? But
Yeah.
but you're still revered. You're very highly thought. You don't, like, if you look back at wrestling, you don't have T3s together, right? You don't have big title runs together, but people knew the BFFs. And then you came here and you did it. And of course, the legacy win was no small thing. Like, that's legit. But I'm hearing people talk about them, and I'm thinking to myself, like, did they go back and read our history? Like, how did they know? Because I don't think they were there at the time.
Like we competitively, outside of that legacy and the one we should have won, the second one.
Did you lose the second one?
No, I don't think so.
Who beat you?
I don't know. I don't remember.
How did that happen?
But in actuality, like, we weren't a team that was competitive. We were a strictly, angle tag team. Right. It was all storytelling on both of our ends of our two characters and everybody that surrounded them, including their NPCs. Whether it was Kira or Static or, and then you branch off and, the whole dynamic between Acid Ed and XS and Strife and whoever else got involved with them. It was all like, we would have a match and out of the 12 posts, 3 would be match action because we were just writing the stories going on outside of the ring and tying it all in.
Yeah. I think that's one of the ways that I'll say that I liked working off of both of you, whether it was tag team matches, which, we were talking about earlier, or whether it was singles matches. One of the things I liked was we could do 3, 6, 9 posts. And I could get enough match action in that I could kind of scratch the itch that I am playing a wrestler and I want to play a wrestler. But at the same time, not so much of it that I was like, by post 4, like, are we still doing this? Can we both tap out? Are we just not interested in still, like, because there was all this other angle work that was going on around it, and the match action just really fit in it nicely. And I think both of you do that very well, right? That's something both of you are capable. I mean, XS doesn't really do match action, so, but
he does commentary.
Commentary. He's great for commentary. Did he tell you that when he decided he wasn't going to play because he got too busy at work, that I started taking Fat XS around with me? Didn't catch on the way Fat Static did.
I miss Static.
So let's jump topics a little bit. Let's go to the main topic that I really want to ask about. And I hope the answer is not just something super quick and simple. But I do want to ask, because I think Strife maybe carries the reputation as one of the best at selling other people's characters and any situation. And certainly XS will sell his way out of any situation. I think I would be remiss in this if I didn't start by saying, what makes that possible? Like, tell the other players how you pick the right thread, understand the voice of the character so well, like write a post where the other person goes, well, shit, I don't need to write my character anymore. You've got it. Because I honestly think we've got a bunch of people that want to hear the answer to that.
It's a really fun character to kind of tell a story about, as a character who has both kind of strengths and weaknesses, because it's a character you can make fun of.
Right.
And it's the nice thing about Rory is that you can absolutely make fun of him. He's a walking joke. So it's really easy to make those punchlines. And it's having that humility and empathy and understanding and relatability. I remember once I had a message kind of back and forth with Battlestone, and this was young Battlestone when he was just starting out, and he was feuding with Sick Boy, and he wanted to kind of emulate Sick Boy a little bit. He wanted to be that strong heel. This is right before he won way too many USOBs. But anyways, His comment to me was he hated the way that I sold Battlestone. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you sell him as weak. You sell him as weak. And I was like, well, I sell him as a dork. That's kind of what he is. And he was like, no, that's not what Battlestone needs to be. And I was just like, you're Eve Fetting, your character is a dork. What more relatable kind of a personality could you have on a character than being a dork? That's something everybody on the boards can relate to. Why would you not?
Yeah.
But that just kind of finding a place, because you want to create a character that projects an image, that projects something, but it has to be both strong and weak. And sometimes some people, I have hit situations where I push too hard on a character and they sent me a little message saying like, hey, that was foul play, pushing it that way or crossing that line. And it's like, okay, fair, that's where the rails are. I can operate within the rails. But still just trying to like push a character into a situation where they're going to be uncomfortable, because when you push a character to where they're uncomfortable, that's when you start to see growth. That's when you start to see, like, you start to challenge yourself and ask yourself, who is that character really? Just kind of taking all of the facade and challenging, like Johnny XS having to fight these like ridiculous moral foibles that nobody in their right mind would have, but to XS, it's just the end of the world. But it's just like, it's really easy to kind of just take little nudges at the character, not like trying to destroy them or crumble them down, but just giving them an uncomfortable little poke and seeing what they do when the cameras usually aren't on them.
That's interesting. Now, is that the same when you find yourself in a situation with, like when somebody sells you into a situation or sells a story into a situation where you're like, man, this is dumb. And yet I've still got to turn this into gold somehow.
Do you have to turn it into gold though? Because I mean, when you're dealing with rolling role play, if it doesn't get continued, is it canon? If a week later, is anybody going to remember it if nobody continued the post?
You're not wrong.
So yeah, sometimes we throw shit on the board and sometimes it is just shit, but sometimes it does fertilize something, more productive. It's just not having fear and just kind of jumping in and throwing some things out there and not being afraid if they fall apart. There's been plenty of times where I've written a post and it's just been like, no, I'm not doing this. This is too far. This isn't going anywhere good.
Really?
But there's been times where I've thrown a post up where I didn't think very much of it, and some element of it somebody else took and caught on, and that's the beauty of the rolling role play, is that we play off of each other. And I mean, God, if we all just wrote our own books just on our own, they would be so terrible. We would be done reading them after 5 pages.
Right.
But the actual play off of each other and the way that we can kind of help inspire each other and encourage each other, and the creativity that we can play off of each other, that's where the joy is in the whole thing.
Don't say that on Twitter.
Also,
We are
no
in the
matter how well
minority.
you sell excess, don't sell them on Twitter.
Yeah, don't sell excess on Twitter. Do not be
And
semi-rapey.
experience can confirm does not work. Oh my gosh. That was a fun Sunday.
Oh God.
All right. So just out of curiosity then, like, let me ask, like, and I'll put somebody out, like when you say like strong and weak, and I think that's such a great perspective to look at other people's characters through and to go, okay, so if I want to put them over, I want to lean on this. And when I want to like stretch the character, challenge them to stretch it, I want to lean on this. So the easiest one, because you probably know him better than the rest, like Ed, strong and weak, right? Like would you take a second and think about that and give us your thoughts on that so everybody can have context around what you're talking about?
Sure. So Ed is great because he's such a simple character. He's such a linear character. His world is a line, and it's usually a line he's charging down so that he can punch something.
Right.
he's so prejudicial and so bigoted and so simple in all of his views. All you have to do is confuse one of those views just a little bit, and all of a sudden his whole world just starts to crumble around him.
Right. And that's some of the best stuff. Like when you've taken them and I'm like, oh, you prick. Like, and I'm laughing while I'm saying it, like, all right, I guess I got to deal with this now, right? It just works so well. So let's think, so many of the other characters. So let me ask about a couple others, because I just think these are great examples. We've got some writers who maybe don't have as much experience, or who maybe don't always know how to pull out or pick out what is the strength and what is the weakness on other people's characters. I know one of the people you were talking about doing a lot with and banging heads with in Wrestle was Philly Fats, and I know he's on, and I love to engage Philly, because I didn't get to play a lot with Philly. I think we played a little bit in a Fed and not a lot, and so if we could ever get him to come back, I'd be excited. So, can you give me what that was for you when you dealt with Philly? Do you remember that?
Well, let's just go back in memory. Philly's whole character point was that he was an outcast. He was not the person you would expect to be the dominant heavyweight champion of a federation. Philly was one of those people who told me that there are rails, and the rails with Philly is he's from Philadelphia and he's fat. Don't cross those two lines. Anything else, he's fair game, but don't cross those two lines.
Right.
But yeah, he was just somebody he was a try-hard. He had a big heart, and he was just all effort without any natural talent or anything to him. He was kind of a dork and just kind of a homely guy, just kind of fighting his heart out, and he just had a big heart to him. And of course, he had his partner Clarence T that you could always.
Right. And
if you notice a trend here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you like, or do you like to use the NPC or the background character as part of that weak side of the character that you might pull on? Is that a thing that you do? Because I've heard you mention them a couple of times.
I do. I have a very long history of being quite evil to the NPCs. Poor Larry, being an example of things that I do. I've also done some foibles to Gooch as well, Tony Gooch, though I did not have anything to do with the mustard. I did not. I did witness it, but I had nothing to do with that one. But no, it's even the announcers, even the referees, just any little layer you can add to the characters, it adds to the depth of future role play.
Yeah.
And that's where you really start to kind of build this fallback, because even if it's a character you're facing and you really struggle to sell them just because of the approach of the other player, or just because it's a new character that they haven't established themselves clearly, or at least given you any sort of ground to really dig into their character. If you can't sell them, you can at least sell everybody around them.
Right. In fleshing a character out or selling a character well, what's more important to sell, their strength or their weakness?
Selling their strength is pretty basic. That's entry level. If you can't sell their strength, then you're probably not going to be selling their character. But it starts to become interesting when you're selling their weakness. And that's when it starts to become fun.
Gotcha. So I think about some of the other characters. Can you tell me who has your favorite weakness to sell in FedEx right now?
She's a character with a clear weakness right now in FedEx.
Yeah.
Genocide is always a fun character to sell because Genocide's only weakness is that he outthinks himself. And so when you're trying to fight Genocide, it's never, you're not going to beat Genocide, but you're going to watch Genocide beat himself.
Right.
Because he's going to scheme himself into a corner that he can't get out of.
That's the problem. When you've got that many schemes and that much douche, you do end up in that situation. So you're not wrong. Has there ever been something you really felt like you didn't sell well, or you ignored because you mentioned earlier, like, if I just don't role play off of it, maybe it's not really canon. Like, has there ever been something where you've just looked and gone, either I sold that terribly or that was so terrible, I just left it behind?
I'm sure there is all the time.
Nothing comes to mind.
No, nothing comes to mind off the top of my head. There are some people who are really good about pointing out when I misstep. Like the passive comments you'd get from Naked Man and things like that. There are those players that reliably point out, like, hey, you were reaching with that one.
Right.
But no, I can't think of anything that I did so terrible that I had to just absolutely just walk away from. I have that guilty pang of always trying to put such a labor on trying to make sure I'm maintaining at least some level of quality. And if I get to the point where I'm just not reading the boards to be able to sell properly, or I'm just not inspired to be able to write at a decent level,
Yeah,
I take a break or change something.
right. I gotcha. So let me shift gears a little bit. I think we didn't go really down the rabbit hole, but I think we got a good conversation around what you really look for in order to kind of put somebody else's character over. And I think that's good advice for the players that have been here. Is there something specific you do when you get pulled into an angle, or you see an angle and you want to kind of, even if you don't want to just dive right into it, you at least want to glance off of it and have some kind of rub against that angle? Is there anything specific you look for, like, rather than just let me take the main piece of the angle? Like, how do you come at it and get involved in it without just bulldozing in?
I don't know. That's always the way back when you're in a fed like one of Mav's old feds in Wrestle early on with the monk. The monk was such a backseat driver. He wasn't a front seat driver at all, because you were dealing with a federation that had people like Cyberpunk and some guys that ran fed wide angles,
Right.
and they had plans and they were driving things. And the monk was just along for the ride for all that stuff. I'd wait for them to basically IM me and say, hey, can you do this and this thing? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll write the role play. That's fine, I can do that. But when you're looking at other people's feds and they've got their own, when you're looking at other people's storylines and they've got their own thing going, and clearly there's a person they're trying to interact with and get something going, to get involved in that without derailing it or directing it back at you, but just kind of like continuing their angle. It's hard because I think it first started when I was working with Strife, and I just didn't like my character. I just didn't know what to do with my character. But then again, I saw so many of these other toys in the toy box, and I was like, wow, why isn't Static like emphasizing like how amazing Static's character was? Because he was literally a character that was so lazy that he wanted to get all of the credit, but he only liked being in tag team matches because he liked being able to delegate the majority of the work off to somebody else. Like that, like how could you not?
Oh, and XS is who he delegated it to.
Yeah.
It was it's funny, right? Who could out lazy each other almost, but
Yeah.
But back then XS was like typically super motivated, right? He was all about getting to the top. This is before he was really anywhere near, semi-comedic. He took himself very seriously in the beginning. And it really wasn't until a few like accidental angles and maybe a little success also got me to start role-playing XS differently. Like he got to where he needed to be in my eyes. And then I'm like, oh, I could do all this really cool shit with him now because I have a USOB, I have a T3, I have all these world title runs, and now I could really enjoy it. And yeah, I mean, in the beginning, Excess and Static were definitely what he just said. I mean, Static was super lazy. We would even role play, like Excess would do a bunch of work. Static would end up tagging himself in, get the finish, raise his hands, and Excess would just be fucking pissed off.
So wait, so when Static stopped playing, you just adopted his personality?
It's not belonging me to steal.
I mean, there may have been
That's
a talent
lazy.
Nazi influence in there.
Yeah, you're not wrong. All right, so we've got a couple other questions I want to get to before we talk top five. So you mentioned that you are up to speed on the fantasy draft we did. Stripe went 6th overall, even though everybody has him in their top 5 list, and most people have him pretty high on that list. So who got drafted before him that shouldn't have?
So let's see. First one was Alan Scott.
Yeah.
And it was Diggsy.
Yep. No, it was Alan, Tony Robes,
Diggsy.
Diggsy.
Diggsy. Okay. And then it was Stan
Gino?
Daniels and Gino.
Gino, Stan Daniels, and then Strife.
Gino went over Stan Daniels too. That was a Hall of Famer.
There's one name that doesn't belong in that group. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
For all I know, he could say all 5 of them shouldn't have gone before him.
No.
I think we have some people who would make that argument.
Yeah.
Well, and there's the one regret I have as Strife is it's not getting into FedEx sooner and not crossing paths with Diggsy. Because I cross paths with Diggsy occasionally.
Yeah.
In Wrestle. We had a couple of almost matches that fell apart for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And it just every time I just tried to save it, like, no, don't quit this week. Wait, quit next week. Let's get this through. But no, that never actually happened. So yeah, I regret not playing with Diggsy. But I know how much you guys hold him in esteem.
You do. Yep. I mean, I don't. Maybe this is true of more than just us, but Diggsy got paid by a company to quit writing with us and actually write for real. So,
wasn't he doing sports journalism? Yeah,
he was doing. I'm trying to remember. It was what it's some portion of ESPN
right
in the Boston
back in the
market.
day.
They actually sent him to the Olympics to cover some of the Olympics as well. The Beijing. Beijing, I think, was his last real big thing. So, who knew? So who? Come on, throw some names.
So
let's get some heat.
So Strife first, Tony Robes. I don't know if Tony Robes could run a Fed. He could play a good champion. He can play a good role, but how many roles can he really play?
Do we know yet that he can play a good champion?
Yeah. I don't think he's actually had the championship, has he? Not a real one?
He recently got a tag belt, but I feel like Maverick Dawson carried him to it. So
and let's see. Diggsy, Stan Daniels. Stan writes really good matches. He does.
I'm so excited that you're about to throw shade at Stan Daniels.
He does write very good matches, but could he run an entire Fed? Could he run multiple angles at once?
Well,
what's Stan at his best?
When he's Manhaniels is when he's at his best.
I think Manhaniels is him as it is most popular. Stan Daniels at his best. That's such a good question. Certainly, there's an argument to be made that he had some real big play in the system, right? He was a system guy.
Yeah.
And I would point to his time probably for about 6 months before the good guys, and then the first 6 months of the good guy. So that year for me, he was all over FedEx. And I mean, he's a tough, I would not want him head to head in a match in the King of Wrestling. Like he's a tough guy. And angle wise, that guy sells everything. Like not unlike you, like really does kind of go after and go, you threw a little like one line throwaway in your post that I might notice. I noticed, and now I'm going to blow it into an angle. Like he's that guy. So, you know, the whole, first he was the hero of FedEx, and then, you know, he fed his, maybe I fed a dog to some crocodiles, but then he turned his crocodiles into boots that he could wear because, you know, he didn't want to look after them anymore, and did his heel turn. And so like, I tend to think of Stan as an exceptional writer who will get out in front of everything. But if you catch him in that period where he's not active, maybe not. So.
Well, and then for Genocide, I mean, how much are we talking about? Just straight everything Genocide is doing, or the things that he's having other people do for him?
So that's a great question. So the draft premise was that you get the character at their best.
So his best would be when he's with Alan Scott, right?
I don't know if he would say that. That's the best I've seen him be, right? Like, but so for me, Gino was number one on my draft board, and Diggsy was number one on my draft. Like they were 1-1.
Yeah.
And so Lars and I had a conversation, and I knew Lars wanted Diggsy, and I knew I was either getting you or Stan, but for the dynamic of my Fed, I wanted Stan and Gino.
Yeah.
To like, I was going to build the good wrestling federation around getting Stan and Gino. I knew I wasn't getting Alan, and because I wasn't going to take my own character, and he wasn't going to fall to the end of the draft when I added one of my characters to play in the Fed. And I knew that Lars would be super happy to get you. So I said to Lars, like, let's flip. Like, what do you think? Like, let's flip. If you want Diggsy, I want to be able to take the sandwich pick so I can get both of them side by side. Because I wasn't sure Lars wouldn't take Stan, although like Stan Strife, I think we're in the conversation together. And so it was, we flipped picks, and we probably could have just not flipped picks. I could have taken Gino, and he would have taken Diggsy and you, and then it would have come back around to Stan. So, so that's how it got put together. So are you saying, for the record, so that I can make sure Stan sees this, that you don't think he should have been picked before you?
That's what he said 3 times.
Yeah. Right. That will never have come back to bite me in the ass.
So here, what I love about it is, and that's why I don't actually mind asking. Like, I love the idea that Tony or Stan or anybody else you made the comment about would see it and be like, if Strife shows up again, like I'll find a reason for us to get. Like, I love that that's the outcome. The natural outcome is let's have a go, right?
Yeah.
And there isn't a top 6 match for you that wouldn't be must read posting, right? Like all of them would be must read. I even Tony, who has no business being in the first round as a pick, that would still be must read posting. Like Strife and Tony, the arrogant young player and the grizzled guy who never really wanted to be in this crap anyway, like would be such an interesting, like, I lost my leg for this. I'm for sure not rolling.
Yeah. Right? How would I drag Rory back into a wrestling ring? I have no idea.
If only there was someone who could punch him until he gave in and did it.
I mean, he'd have to punch real hard. He's got 13 Johnny XS bastards to take care of raising. It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
That is a lot. Well, that alone, that alone might be motivation. I love the idea. So while I've got you on this, after we wrapped around, so second round went Stan Strife, Storm, Man of War. Now, we've said this, and I'll say it openly, like, this draft's wildly different if other people draft. It's all about who you played with, who you saw, who, you know, like you dropped a bunch of names earlier talking about how pleased you were that they reached out, impressed, and I didn't play with them. So I was like, oh, that's cool. And I love that you got that affirmation from people you really respected, but I didn't, like, guys who love Stormfire, I'm like, I regret that I never got to play with Stormfire. The way you say, like, oh, I wish I'd been in a Digsy Fed at a time when we could really do something. Like, I've got a list of guys like that where I'm like, damn, right? Like, damn. But you look at that list of 4 and you go, okay, so that hits the second round, and you go first in the second round or second in the second round. It depends on, you know, whether Lars and I flip, but it comes out the same way. And so it runs down from there. What do you think of the second round? What do you think about being grouped with Storm and Manowar? Like, there's a couple of guys who are in FedEx right now. So if you wanted to talk some shit about them, now would be the time.
I'm good. No, Mano was actually back in the CRF, I believe. So I interacted with him with the Monk for a long time ago. I'm not sure Strife and Manowars ever crossed paths. But that's a guy that can go so many different directions. He's just really quality work.
Oh, nothing but quality work. The promos are quality work, by the way. I don't know if you catch the promos that he's done. He does such a good job cutting a promo. Even the ones, I finally cut a couple of promos, and if you didn't see them, be entertained. They're pretty funny. And he was a big part. Like, we sat around and traded ideas. He's such a great, like, he's like just bouncing ideas back and forth until and we've probably got 3 or 4 ideas. And I'm like, let's do this. And he's like, that's amazing. And he flushes it all out. And then I go, you need a green screen. He's like, I don't have it. Like, all right, never mind. New idea. Right. And so he's really good that way. So for sure he is, you know, he's a lot of fun. And you know, the only thing that, you know, makes him better is the availability to kind of get in a little more. And I think that's true of all of us at this. Like, we're not in our 20s anymore. We don't have nothing but time.
Damn work.
Well, it's not just that. Like, do you guys ever stop and think about how much time we put in this game in the past?
Yeah.
Like, we play now and people are like, oh, the boards are blowing up. And you're like, oh yeah, there were 30 posts today. And then you're like, weren't there days that like 30 posts would have accounted for 3 of us?
Yeah. I remember going into work when I in the beginning of Wrestle or even late C-Slam, and I would spend the first 45 minutes at work reading the boards before I even started working. And then I'm like, okay, how can I finish my work quick enough so now I can post and reply to what I want to reply to? But no, now I got to read another 20 posts because 20 posts went up in the last 2 hours.
Right.
So it was now, okay, now when's lunch? So I can then read more and then get 2 or 3 posts up. And now it's just impossible.
Right. Yeah, it gets, well, it's a lot slower, or the pace certainly seems to have shut down a little bit. So, Man of War's just thrown up in the live stream. Like, how many alts got created because people just didn't want to post off themselves in the old days? For sure that happened.
Yeah. For
sure that happened. So I think while we're on the theme of that, who's Man of War's #1 draft pick? Or sorry, who's Strife's? I don't know why I said Man of War. I was reading something on the screen and thinking about Man of War, asking the question. But who's Strife's #1 draft pick?
I'll take my headphones off.
Yeah. No. Crap, I don't know.
I love that he's thinking about, folks. Just so you know, I sent the questions to him days ago. He knew I was going to ask this.
Right, days is when you send it to Jay, right? When did Jay send that to me?
I
was it today? Did he send it today?
No, I forwarded it the same day. Damn it! The one time I do something right.
We'll give you a second to think about it because I think this one will probably be a little easier. Hey Jay, who's XS's #1 draft pick?
you know, like, so if I were going strictly angles and who can run, like you said, multiple storyline, I'm definitely going Strife. But if I wanted to run a competitive Fed, sort of like how Mavs Feds used to be,
Yeah.
right? For me, then probably Genocide's right up there.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, I was in so many Feds with him back in the day, and just, you know, from how he would get himself into world title shots and the storylines behind everything that involved getting the world title or whatnot. It was great stuff.
Agreed.
His worst angle was like the New Year's Eve shit. I mean, that sucked.
That was the greatest angle of greatest post. I don't know about angle, but for post to accomplish that much heat in one post, I don't know. That's pretty good. All right. So we're back to Strife on this one. Who's your number one pick?
I mean, if I was the head, I was commissioner, and I had to pick, just kind of build my Fed around. God, who would I take first? God.
Are you just worried that Jay's going to be upset? I already
I know
told
it's
him
not me.
No,
It can't be me. Nobody would take me first. That's stupid.
No, Jay would be top 3, but he wouldn't be first.
Didn't I take you like, hold on, I'm trying to do the math on this now. I took you in the 3rd round? That's not bad. Third round's pretty legit.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's 10 rounds. Yeah. I'm second. God.
That's the most casual douche I've ever seen Strife do. Like not straight up in Johnny's face, just like, yeah, there's 10 rounds. I'm a second, and then just moves on. Like,
I'm probably thinking Cyberpunk in the old days.
Oh wow. So what was it about Cyberpunk that you really liked?
He could get the entire Fed active. He literally, his Fed takeover angles, or his stable war angles. He coordinated with other people. He pushed players to kind of build diverse characters. He pushed me. And really, the monk would not have existed very long if it wasn't for him and his involvement. And I'm surprised Mav must have forgotten about him, because he was CRF who came over to the CNS and CWA and NGPW. He had the machine gimmick, which kind of got old because he kept doing it over and over again repeatedly.
Did he stick with it long enough for it to die and then be so dead that it was cool again?
I don't think he got the cool again part. No. Probably one more month.
It's always that one more month. You just gotta.
Yeah.
That's right.
But no, he was a guy that from when I first joined C-Slam, then into the majors and then into Wrestle, he would cook an entire federation and get them all going.
That's awesome.
That's somebody I remember. God, if I start giving props, you're gonna have to add another 30 minutes onto the podcast to all the other players.
Well, you've got a big
list.
There's
so many. Yeah, there's so many.
You've crossed so many. So one of the questions I sent to you guys, and I sent it because the dynamic is always interesting with guys who really get selling and figure out the angles. I thought this was it's the first time I've asked, so no one else has answered this question before. But the BFFs, we force tag teams to Freebird. Who gets added to the BFFs? Like, what's the player that gets pulled in as the 3rd character, and why?
I mean, if we could ever drag Dave back into the game, I mean,
yeah,
Static would fit.
Static,
Static would fit. That was my pick.
Static was he was so quick-witted, and he was a brilliant comedian.
Did you
For
read my
for
notes?
somebody,
This is exactly
no.
what I fucking wrote.
I mean, literally, he and it really took the end of kind of the Johnny XS and Static, and him just kind of being left on his own for a minute when his brilliance really started to shine, because he
Yeah.
was showing like Benny Blair level absurdity humor.
And didn't he go into the AOD for a little bit?
I don't know if there was any official AOD membership, but he deserved it, because there was some funny shit that
He was
put
hanging
together.
with them because I remember. I mean, Naked Man reminded me of this. So he was in. I think he was in maybe UCE with them, and then Excess came over to the UCE, and he's like, "Hey, Static, we're getting back together." And then Naked Man created this whole Dawson's Creek angle where Static was Pacey, I think. No, Excess was Pacey, and and they would fight over Static.
Yeah.
And Static rolled with it perfectly. And I mean, prior to that, I never really interacted with AOD much, just by sheer coincidence, or I kind of like steered away from that for the most part, as far as like where XS was in his career. I didn't want to go through like these strictly comedic angles, right? I love what they wrote.
Adventures.
Yeah, I love what they wrote, but I'll read it from afar and enjoy it that way. And I got pulled into that. It was really great.
So as you were saying that, I had an idea or a question pop in my head. I'm thinking back to you talking about being at work and like reading a bunch and then doing some work and then realizing you're behind and reading a bunch again. And I'm thinking about that in conjunction with like all the selling and all the reading that is required to actually be good at selling. Did you guys read everything that went on the boards in your feds?
No way.
No.
Okay. So how did
I
you
read
decide
what was interesting.
what to read?
I rotated. I tend to rotate. So there will be players that won't want to run with whatever I throw at them. In which case, I'll throw something off of them. It bounces, falls to the floor. Okay. I'll move down the roster and just kind of throw something at somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't. But if I find a couple people that are willing to run with whatever I throw at them, then yeah, we'll go back and forth and make something nice. But until you throw something at somebody, you have no idea how they're going to react.
Mm-hmm. So let's say somebody drops it, right? So you throw it and they drop it. Do they just, unless there's a direct reason for you to read their work, do they just come off your list? Like you see their name and you're like, let me just buzz by that. I don't see any reason to read it. Like, is that how you managed your board time?
Yeah. When it was lean times for my availability to read a board, yeah, there would be, because you could have 5, 6, 7 angles going on the board, and I of course would prioritize the one I wanted to interact with.
Yeah, naturally. I think all of us have done that. Okay. Let's get some top fives out of you guys, because, and don't give me this, let me think about it, because I gave you prep time. So let's talk about, which one do you want to do first? Do you want to do the one about the BFFs, or do you want to do the one specifically about Strife?
Let's start with BFF so Jay can help me out with this.
All right. Top 5 high spots in BFF history. And while I'm doing that, I'm just taking a look at the live chat. If you have an Ask XS or an Ask Strife about selling, now's the time to put them in the chat so that I can make note and we can ask them. So top 5 high spots in BFF history that people should remember.
Well, I'll answer this one. So this is easily the most memorable one, and probably the best read that anybody ever had was the XS vs Stripe round 1 matchup in the King of Wrestling tournament. That was some of the best stuff that we put together.
Why is that?
I mean, if you wanted to see utter dominance by XS, And for the record, Jeff still swears that I knew that you were not showing, which is totally
100%.
totally untrue.
Oh, my camera didn't like tracking me.
My goal early on was to not do a run. I was fine with losing in the first round. If I was going to lose, I was like, let me lose to Strife, and then I'll just tag along with him for the rest of the tournament. But then he no-showed. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I think I had Kashmir the next round. I'm like, okay, I can beat him. So, and then unfortunately I had to sell Aaron Action at the end, but that's hard enough. I should have won 3 tournaments for that.
Oh my gosh. That was such a work. I don't like, so now that we've got Strife here, let me just ask the questions, right? When did he convince you to sign up but not show up?
Why does nobody believe me? I don't understand this.
There's 0% chance he picked you thinking he could win. So he must have known the fix was in. And did you get anything out of it? Like, what was in it for you to let him get over like that?
The bond between BFFs is tight.
All right, so that's one of our high points. It's a terrible high point, so it must be number 5.
Damn it. It's like the Tony Robbins of high points.
That's right. What's number 4?
Probably the SBFF. Well, no, SBFF match would probably be. That's got to be like 3.
Okay.
Yeah, it's higher than 4. I mean, I don't know if we have high spots. We have a lot of just drawn out angles.
Play this out
that,
for like 3 months.
just would go
for
months of how.
It's months, yeah.
Yeah. And then I would go inactive, and then I would just casually read the board, and he would post something. I'm like, oh shit, I need to jump back in on this.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
So what?
But the legacy win, I think, is 1 for me. SBFF match is definitely 2 or 3. When we got together,
Johnny having sex with Kira has got to be on.
Right. The beginning of it is definitely 100% up there, especially, I didn't want to take liberty with anybody's character kind of back then, especially him, because, we've crossed paths for many times, and I remember the Kira character. So, but then when it just got going, it was fucking hysterical.
All right, let me go to the live stream because there's some good questions here. So, Karen Crow, Brendan has asked, hey, we had a bout of oversolaria, which basically was a disease that ran through the Fed where, like, whatever was going on in your head, you would oversell it. So he thought he got bit by a zombie, so he oversold being a zombie, like, and lived it out. And so it ran through the Fed for, like 5-6 weeks at least. And so he'd like to know, how would Strife have oversold oversolaria?
I mean, I'd have to have something to come off of oversold area. I couldn't just oversell oversolaria on its own.
Right.
But yeah, that sounds brilliant.
So, Matt would like to know when Strife is coming back to join CWA. And I think it's only fair that we acknowledge that Strife's too big a name to play in the minor leagues. So
that's the Fed at our own pace.
That's right. Gino has become a meme with that statement, and there's no way around it. I've seen everything now. Discord, by the way, the greatest waste of time since our game. I've seen every version of that statement you can imagine. I was told I could judge at my own pace. I was told I could read at my own pace. Like everything that you can imagine. All the way down to, if you saw the Rislut show with his daughter trolling him on it, I was told I could parent at my own pace. I've seen them all, and it's the greatest meme ever. Man of War asks Strife, who's a character you saw and thought to yourself, I wish I could write them as my character. Like, I wish I could just take them because I'd like to just use them.
So Harry Colt Calhoun, he comes up with amazing characters, amazing gimmicks, and they're always really red hot, coming like right out.
Yeah.
He makes some really high quality characters. I didn't know. So was it Diggsy that was Mr. Conservative?
That's right.
Okay, and Mr. Conservative, I always loved that gimmick. That was a really well thought out application, and that was Bush years. I mean, good God, what could be done with it today?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he was on it. That's for sure.
I never knew that was Diggsy. Wow.
Oh, did you not? Yeah.
No.
Bruce had a bunch of alts. I think that one most people knew. He had a lot of alts. I'm not sure most people realized were him.
Yeah, when you make alts sometimes, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody, you don't want to go shouting out like, hey, this one's the alt of Strife. It's just like, no, because when you're Strife, you get this name and they get this reputation. And then you start wondering like, are people judging my matches or are they just judging my name?
Right.
And are people interacting with me or are people avoiding me because they're intimidated by the name?
Right.
So you just can't.
You almost just want to be a nobody, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that sounds like a nice thing if I could be that.
Yeah, I get it. Another question, this one for XS. You were kind of Jake Price before Jake Price. Like, how do you make the $1 Million Man Rick Rude gimmick work?
Is that what Jake Price was supposed to be?
Jake Price is supposed to be that whole $1 Million Man kind of blend with that Rick Rude. Like, everybody wants me. Look what great shape I'm in. But like, I'm the guy you dream of being, like, built, rich, deal. And to some extent, you certainly had that with XS. And then you decided to show us that he was like, let's open the closet and show you how twisted and perverted he is inside, which is actually what you're most remembered for the character, right?
Well, that's the irony of XS, because even when he was like, oh yeah, he's Hollywood, and then it was like, what movies is he in? And they were always like B movies that
Skinamax.
Yeah, you never even heard of. Yeah,
it's so true.
Didn't even go to VHS.
So, but I think that's, goes back to what you said earlier, Aaron, which is, finding the weakness in the character is what makes the character sellable and interesting and where you want to press on, right? So, looking at XS in its conceptualization and pressing on, like, what movies? I don't think I've seen you in any movies. Like, what movies would those be? And having somebody like Jason be open enough to be like, oh yeah, they're the movies we play at between 12 and 4 a.m. right? Like, that totally works, and that definitely does it.
Quick story about that. So a while ago, when my eldest son was about 2, my father used to come over to watch him, right? So one morning, me and my wife were getting ready in our bathroom, or getting dressed or whatnot. And we walk out into the living room. My father's scrolling through the channels, and what is he landed on Skinamax, and he's watching it with my son on his lap.
Come on, Dad.
My wife's like, whoa. He's like, what? I'm just changing the channels.
Oh, does he have a mustache? Does your dad have a mustache?
He used to have in the 70s the thickest, like, chopped sideburns and almost like an afro too.
Awesome. That's awesome.
But not an XS mustache. I wish I could grow one.
What a shame. What a total shame. All right, let's go back to the other question. The top 5 favorite opponents for Strife.
So sure, Sick Boy would be on that list. Philly Fats, if you just let me win occasionally more, that wouldn't be so terrible. Alan Scott was fun. Alan
We had a
Scott
good
was
time.
fun.
We had a
Yeah.
good time, that's for sure.
I think Alan Scott and Ed, I'd have to fight between which one would be better.
Sure.
But yeah,
Different dynamic for sure.
different dynamic. Yeah. I always loved Stormfire matches. They were always a blast. Let's see. God, fifth one. God.
It's like Gino's on this podcast.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible.
The lack of prep work.
I know.
You see why we're attacked.
Awful. Yeah.
Except he's the one that carries the team.
Why do we always have to bring that up?
Hey, there's a dynamic. There's a dynamic. It's got to be give and take at some point in time. I mean, good God.
You'd think.
Shit. That's a genocide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's on a lot of people's list. I think what's interesting to me is 60% of your list are people that I didn't get to spend a lot of time, or in some cases any time playing with. And so I'm super intrigued that, you've got a lot of like top opponents that I didn't even get to cross paths with, which is, sad for me, but awesome to hear about all these other people that you really liked playing against.
I mean, we only brushed paths. We probably didn't actually get to role play against one another until I got to FedEx, and that was pretty late in the EFED game.
Yeah, there was a lot of like cross paths. Like certainly I knew XS before we really hit it here. We created the talent Nazis in Rassel, got in all kinds of trouble real fast. Go figure. And so you guys had already done your story by that point, but you were, a 5-minute commentary here, or, a week overlap there, but no real opportunity for us to knock anything around until you came to FedEx. That's right. Yeah, that's interesting. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask before we left. There's obviously Sponsor Wars draft coming next week. Here on the podcast, we'll listen to the captains pick players. And one of the big things that happens in Sponsor Wars is captains will often reach out behind the scenes and communicate with people to say, hey, what are the odds? Like, it would be great to have a surprise return, to have a guy show up. So, I mean, I got to ask in advance if you're willing to blow somebody's secret for us. Like, has anybody reached out to say, hey, Johnny XS, hey, Strife, hey, BFFs, if nobody knows, maybe I can sneak you both onto my team. Like, you want to drop the bombshell now and tell everybody we're going to see you guys in a week, or what's the deal?
I have nobody's reached out to me.
Does anybody have your email address besides me?
So how is this possible? Because I haven't changed my email address in 25 years. I'm literally, my Discord is still my old AIM handle. How is it nobody recognizes me anywhere? So, was I that much of an introvert?
Did you communicate with the current player base? Did you communicate off boards a whole lot with people?
For me, mostly it was related to the boards. So when we were having conversations, it's usually what was going on the boards and what we were doing on the boards. So yeah, I didn't besides the occasional conversation with Benny Blair, and you know how those go. But no, yeah, not too many, unfortunately. That's so yeah, when I unplugged from the game, I didn't really keep in touch with many of you guys at all.
So what you're saying is that if they want to know, they can ask me, because your registration for communication from the site under Strife will be the right email address.
It is the email address I use now, yes.
There you go. And everybody knows how to get a hold of XS, and I didn't hear him say yes. So either the captains, captains know better.
Yeah, exactly. Like, do you want somebody to no show, and to
Or
maybe post once and get bored.
or somebody has a really good plan.
Me too.
One character that you would really love to see show up because a captain on Sponsor Wars reached out and was like, hey, you got to come back. That isn't playing right now. I would love to get one from each of you. And you can't pick each other. Right? This isn't the King of Wrestling. We're not having one of you pick the other one and then neither of you show up. That's not a thing.
Oh. I also miss Homeless Jay.
Yeah, love Homeless Jay. Wish we could see some Homeless Jay. Man, I think I had him in the King of Wrestling, and it was an eye opener. I love him so much after that.
You
match.
have no idea, yeah, because I mean, from a distance, you can look at him, and it's like you don't understand like what he's capable of storyline and angle wise.
Yeah, he was fantastic, and I was blown away, and it was one of the most entertaining matches of that run for sure. Absolutely. What about you, XS?
So
Who would you like to see show up?
I'm going to pick a name from probably half the roster doesn't remember him, but from Wrestle, it was he ran from about 2002 maybe to 2006 or so. Pratchard, who was really solid. Yeah, Prackard, sorry. He was a really solid role player. I was in NC with him when XS left Gino hanging with the NC. And I had Haley go run in there. Haley and him tagged for quite some time. And he was just, he's like, not just reliable, but you're always getting a quality role play out of him. He could roll, he could go with anything. He was just a really, not a top 5 player, but a very good player who honestly I forgot totally about until I found an old bio of Haley's from like 2005. And he was on there. I'm like, holy shit, how did I forget about this guy?
You still have those?
I had it in like one of my first, when I left my job in 2000 and I don't know, when I left my first job in the mid 2000s, I started like emailing myself on Gmail all my wrestle and anything I had, like bios, pictures, and they're all the way deep in my Gmail files. So I just stumbled upon it. I'm like, oh wow, I was terrible writing then. Now I'm adequate.
It is terrible, right?
You are adequate. Nobody's arguing. Hey, last question, guys, and then we'll wrap up. I really appreciate this. Who hasn't been on the podcast that you'd really like to see come on?
I mean, if you could get Ed on.
Yeah.
Talking about Naked?
Naked, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think he kind of threw up the brick wall and said, I don't have a camera, which is a shame because I think he would be really interesting to talk to. He certainly has a different experience, played different circles of the game than I did, and certainly lots of AOD time to share and talk about. I think that would be wonderful as well. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, Strife has been in the house. I mean, this is one of the most requested podcasts we got. Let's hope that everybody is as excited about it as I was to do it. I really appreciate you making time and doing it, Aaron. I know we chased you for a little while, and I'm super excited that we were able to connect it and put it together.
Well, thank you for reaching out. I didn't know you guys were doing this till Jay mentioned it to me, so I'm glad to see that we're still doing it.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught kind of how it all kind of came back together, but it was strange. Like, I want to say last summer at some point, Naked threw up a random post on a dead board, like no one had been on it in years, and threw up a post about like showing up with a gun and killing everybody. And for some reason, we were all like, that's a great idea. And we played dead, and we like sold the Afterlife for, a week or 2 weeks, like not much. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of guys stayed around for a little while. And then just as it was dying out, Johnny Rude reached out to me. It was right around his birthday. And so we were just chatting, and he said, you know what I'd really like is I kind of miss catching up with the guys. Like, why don't we do a podcast? And I was like, yeah, like, let's do a podcast. And so we did the podcast, which was so much fun that I then got Tim to come on and do a podcast with me a week later. And one of the questions I asked him was, what would it take for people to play again? And from that conversation, 4 or 5 people started poking around on the boards, and like a week or 2 weeks later, I decided to do a podcast. And after that, like 10 people were poking around on the boards. And we kind of looked up and we're like, is this actually going to be a thing? Like, is this really going to happen? And we all thought Christmas would come and that would be the end. Like, everybody's it's Christmas.
Yeah.
And it just, you know, we started seeing some people we didn't expect to see, and some people we didn't, you know, Techno came back, and like some of those guys that we all knew but seemed to be like harder to reach, less likely to show up, kind of showed up. Jay-Z showed up, and we were like, oh, like maybe there really are still people out there who would play if there was a place to play. And the next thing you know, we were doing again. And as soon as we really started to do it again, Price was like, well, that's enough for me. I'm out.
Board's got too active.
That's right. That's right. So I'm really glad that you were able to do this. We would certainly love to see some strife, and you know, if we got our quarterly excess post, we wouldn't be upset by that either.
I'm already thinking of something to drag somebody else back.
Oh,
No.
I mean, now I'm super intrigued. Like, ooh, who is the someone else? Do you want to drop the name? You know, play the long game.
No, yeah. He's gonna do the genocide is coming. He's gonna tease it for 30 days.
So quick question before we leave on that note then, Strife, is there anyone that you have a line to that we don't have a line to?
No, I really don't have a line to anybody.
That's a shame.
Other than I might maybe still have Keebler's old email address.
Man, I can only imagine that there would be a lot of love. I didn't get to play in a Keebler Fed, but all I heard from people was just how creative Keebler Feds ended up being.
I think I have his email also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even just to come on the podcast and talk about what he used to do running Feds and running events, I think that would be a wonderful podcast. Super interesting. So I'll just plant those seeds. You guys water them as much as you want. And I will thank everybody for their time tonight. Guys, so glad we could do this. I am optimistic that we will see a BFF title run sometime in the near future. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Thanks all. I'll see you guys. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Jeff.
You bet.
Bye.